along the way so that we can address these at the Q&A. Please indicate your school along with your questions so we know which room should address your question. With that, I'd like to hand the floor over to Shay, President of SMSUK, to say a few words.
Hi everyone, I'm Shay and thank you so much for coming to today's event. So, the Singapore Medical Society, also known as SMSUK, is a non-profit group that represents the interests of those who have close ties with Singapore and who have studied medicine or dentistry in the United Kingdom. We provide both academic guidance and socializing or networking opportunities. SMSUK was founded in 1994 and started off with just a few schools in London. We are very proud to say that today, SMSUK comprises 26 schools across the UK and has over 1,200 lifetime members. We aim to serve Singapore-educated medical and dental students in the UK through career development, education, networking opportunities, and social activities. Even through the pandemic, we have held many successful events, including our annual conference. This was in collaboration with the Malaysian equivalent of SMSUK, and we have also held workshops such as our on-call workshop, which actually happened this morning, and language classes. These help students and alumni who want to return to Singapore better adapt to the local system. SMSUK also provides networking opportunities such as our mentorship program, which will be starting again soon this year. We give support from before medical and dental school through our pre-university talks such as today and up until and even after you qualify as doctors by providing you help with your career choices such as choosing a specialty. Lastly, SMSUK also has a range of social activities. In the past, we have traveled to Malta and Malaga. We also have many organized trips within the UK. Through the pandemic, we subsidized many travel groups all across the UK and Europe from Inverness to Madrid. We look forward to seeing you at our future events once you have successfully obtained a spot to study medicine or dentistry in the UK. Please do get connected via our Instagram and like our Facebook page in the meantime. I'll now be giving you a glimpse into the last 3 years of my life studying dentistry in the UK. I will be leaving it to Zhe to tell you more about the application process from a tertiary institution in Singapore as I did my A-levels in the UK. To provide some context, I do dentistry at King's College London and I did my A-levels in the UK. I applied to Cardiff, King's College London, Bristol, Newcastle, and Bath for a master's in pharmacology for the non-med/dentistry option. I applied with predicted grades and I was offered spaces at all unis except Bristol, and I accepted King's in the end. So next slide, please. So in my first year, it was actually, I started in 2019. It started with obviously SMSUK's orientation camp. That was my journey, the beginning of my journey at dental school, where I got to meet fellow freshers doing dentistry and medicine in the UK. Once I got there, I started continuing my hobbies that I had picked up. There's truly communities for any hobbies in the UK. You can continue hobbies that you already have, or you can find new communities to pick up anything new. There's truly something for everyone in the UK. After my exams, I took a short trip to Paris with some of my friends. And as you can see, I was involved in the Singapore Society of my uni. This year was quite cut short because of COVID, but I still had a lot of fun in my first year. So in second year, I had to go back, even though I think a lot of students stayed online and could stay in Singapore, but we had hands-on clinical trainings on phantom hits, also known as dummies. So as you can see, I did some root canal training, some fillings. We didn't have any patient contact just yet, but it was still really fun to be able to practice these procedures. Due to COVID, I couldn't do much traveling outside of the UK. So my friends and I travel around the UK, taking road trips, and a lot of time was also spent at home when I was in uni. So you can see I engaged in some cooking and baking. Yeah. So the last year that has just passed has been the busiest year, but probably the most rewarding because it was the year that I started seeing my own patients. So having that patient exposure and contact has been really rewarding. They are really thankful for all the care that I've provided for them so far. Aside from that, I've also been spending a lot more time in the labs and clinical skills, doing things such as crown preps, as you can see on the top left. And yeah, so this year we also had our halfway ball, which is when we celebrate the halfway mark of our course, basically. So it's been quite fun to see everyone grow up over the last 2.5 years. And of course, with COVID restrictions easing, I have started to travel around the UK, and my family has also managed to come up and visit. So I really want to just show you guys that there's a lot to offer in the UK. Obviously, studying and your course is very important, but please don't forget to, make use of the other opportunities, such as being in like a very central location in Europe, so you can travel very easily. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shay, for your opening address and sharing. I will now be taking us through the application process for both medicine and dentistry in the UK. Okay, so these slides will be very dense and full of information, and I'll be speaking very fast. I apologize in advance. Please don't worry about writing all of this down. The slides will be shared after the event for those of you who filled out the feedback form. So you have to stay until the end of the event to fill the feedback form. So hi again, my name is Jia Qing. I'm a third-year medical student at the University of Oxford and I applied in the 2019-2020 UCAS cycle. So this is what we'll be covering today. I will start by some factors to consider when choosing your school. So these are a range of factors to consider. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are just some of the main things that you might want to consider. We'll start off with accreditation by SMC or SDC, which determines whether you can come back to Singapore to practice. So for medicine, there are 44 medical schools in the UK, but only 16 are recognized by the Singapore Medical Council or SMC. These are 5 to 6 year programs with or without an intercalated bachelor's degree, which I'll touch on later, or they can be 4-year graduate courses. So this is a map of the accredited medical schools in the UK. And as for dentistry, there are 16 dental schools, only 13 are recognized by the Singapore Dental Council. From 2029 onwards, there'll be a qualifying exam on return. These are also 5 to 6 year programs or 4-year graduate courses. And this is a map showing the accredited dental schools in the UK. So a bit more about the course structure. Medicine, as I said, is 5 or 6 years. So there will be 2 preclinical years and 3 clinical years. This is very similar to what we have in Singapore. However, there's an intercalated year, which is done in your 3rd year, where you get a BSc or MSc. This is compulsory for Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial, UCL, and Edinburgh, but optional for other schools. For dentistry, it's usually 5 years. Preclinical is 1 to 2 years. Clinical is 3 to 4 years. The timing of clinical exposure depends on the school. Usually for dentistry, they have earlier clinical exposure from year 1, but even for medicine, it depends on which school you go to. Some schools you get to have clinical attachments from the 1st year, whereas in other schools, you really only go to hospitals in your 3rd or 4th year. So for the course structure, clinical teaching tends to be quite similar across different schools, not much of a difference, whereas preclinical teaching can vary quite a lot. So if you have any questions about specific schools, you can maybe address it to our volunteer speakers later in the breakout rooms. Dentistry is usually structured similarly to medicine, but with a greater emphasis on hands-on skills, as Shay mentioned earlier. So the teaching methods, this is just an overview of the main teaching methods. Traditional courses are divided into several subjects taught separately, whereas integrated courses, which is most of the UK now, tend to break down these traditional barriers. And integrated courses usually comes with systems-based learning, which means that the body is taught by organ system, such as cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory, gastrointestinal, musculoskeletal, nervous system, etc. Those are organ systems. And problem-based learning is something that some schools also incorporate into their teaching. I will go through them one by one now. So traditional is mostly just Oxford and Cambridge now. They are subjects-based, so subjects include like anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, biochemistry, neuroscience, pathology, etc. There's actually a slight difference between Cambridge and Oxford. So if you want to know what exactly happens in each year, you have to go to the individual school's website. There's too much information to put here. In the 3rd year is an intercalated year. You get a BA or a BSc. So the difference between Cambridge and Oxford, I believe, is that in Cambridge, you have a wider choice as to what degree you want to do. It can be something that's not directly related to medicine, whereas at Oxford, everyone still does medical sciences, but you get to choose options for what subject or topic you want to focus on for your research project. In the 4th to 6th year is clinicals. So subjects make the course more research focused with less emphasis on clinical studies until later years. It's a lecture and supervision or tutorial system. So Cambridge and Oxford prides themselves in this, the low student to teacher ratio and small group tutorials, which is maybe 2 students to 1 tutor or 4 students to 1 tutor. And that is how they think you can learn most effectively. The difference is that Cambridge calls it supervisions, also calls it tutorials, but they're essentially the same thing. Next is the integrated system, which is most schools in the UK now. They are, as I said, systems-based, and they may or may not involve PBL, problem-based learning. They integrate clinical exposure from first year into teaching, rather than like traditional setting, which is a clear divide between preclinical and clinical. So they teach material, and then you learn to apply these material, your knowledge, in a clinical setting. It may help those of you who like to see how stuff you learn from textbooks can be actually applied. Then there's problem-based learning. It's also systems-based, but it's just that the teaching method may be a bit different in the sense that it has discussions plus lectures plus clinical experience. It emphasizes critical thinking, active self-directed learning, and small group work. The basic structure is that you'll be presented with a case or problem, you brainstorm possible hypotheses and solutions, and then you decide and identify learning objectives that you need to solve it, gather information through various different methods, and then present the findings to the group and the facilitator. There's an additional thing called a spiral curriculum, which is something that a few schools may do, which means repeatedly coming back to key concepts multiple times throughout the course with increasing levels of complexity or from different angles. So an example is Bart's medicine. I took this diagram from a slide by my friend who did this talk last year. And basically, like in year 1, for example, if you look at the diagram, you do all the systems, but you study normal function. And then in year 2, you do all the systems again, where you study abnormal function. Generally, that's it. And this is in contrast to NTU LKC medicine, which is integrated and systems-based as well, but not spiral. So you learn normal function and abnormal function one after the other. Yeah, so you learn like one system, normal, abnormal, then the next system, normal, abnormal, and so on. So for dentistry, the teaching style preclinical is similar to medicine, but with a greater emphasis on anatomy of the head and neck. There are a wide range of teaching methods. They can incorporate all or some of them: lectures, tutorials, seminars, PBLs, blah, 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 e-learning, phantom heads, labs, clinics, attachments, and outreach clinics. There's generally earlier exposure to clinicals from year 1 and a much smaller cohort size than most medical schools. Most of them are below 100, except for King's College London. So tuition fees. This depends on the school that you go to. So you have to check each school's website, but it's usually about 30,000+ per year. Some schools charge more for clinical years than preclinical. So for example, at Oxford, I pay 30,000+ for preclinicals, but I pay 40,000+ for clinicals. There's an additional cost of teaching levy for 10,000 per year for Scotland and 10,000 per year in clinical years for Northern Ireland. Scholarships are very limited, which we'll talk about towards the end of the talk. Living costs. So this really varies depending on your lifestyle and where you are in the UK. London is obviously the most expensive, but even for 2 people staying in the same place, you have very different expenditures depending on your lifestyle. So it's very hard to give like a definitive figure. Your own spending will be very different from someone else's. Generally, food is, eating out is more expensive than in Singapore because you don't have like hawker centers or food courts and stuff, whereas groceries can be cheaper. So you can actually save a lot of money by buying your own groceries and cooking your own food. For transport, public transport is more expensive than Singapore, but in some cities, depends on the size of your city, you may be able to get around by just walking and cycling. For example, in Oxford, a lot of us just cycle. And if you want to go between cities, we usually take the train. For location, consider culture, cost of living, city or campus university, size of the city or town, population size, student life, and so on. And so this really depends on like the lifestyle or the type of vibe or atmosphere that you want. Some places like Cambridge and Oxford are more like small towns or rather than cities, whereas London is obviously a very big city and it's more similar to Singapore. And so it really depends on the kind of life you want. Rankings are not very important, so I'll kind of just skip this slide. I just want to say that they are not that reliable in the sense that they focus on different things. And so depending on which ranking you look at, you'll have a different list. Entry requirements. So check each school's website for their specific requirements. I know a lot of you asked about this, but it really varies between schools. Although in general, I would advise that for A levels, aim for 3 H2As. So because in UK, they have A star. In Singapore, we don't have A star, so just 3 H2As. Usually chemistry is compulsory, and with one other science or math. So I heard that some schools require biology, but some schools don't. That's why you need to check which schools you're applying to. And for example, if you take physics, there are still many schools that you can apply to with physics. And for IB, usually it's 35 to 40. So again, it varies depending on the school. I've seen schools that are like 36 or above or 37 or above, usually, yeah. For admissions tests, UCAT or BMAT, which we'll explain later. So obviously, to be able to apply strategically, you should know your options well. Some schools, like in the middle here, the match schools, there are no guarantees, but you know that it is something that you can attain, like you'll reasonably be able to get in. Whereas for the reach schools, maybe like the more difficult to get in ones, the top schools that you think it's harder for you based on your either your grades or portfolio, but it's not impossible because a lot of it still depends on luck and what happens and how much effort you put into the application process. Safety schools are easier to get into, like you know that you're more confident in getting into them. So I guess when you put your choices into UCAS, because you have 4 choices, don't put a school that you don't want to go to, but also have a few backup choices because you may or may not get into your first choice. This is just a continuation of the previous slide, but because a lot of you asked about the admission rates. So I found it very hard to actually find reliable figures for recent years because normally they only include, like they don't include international students in the admission statistics for the entire country. But from previous year slides, they say that it's up to 7.5% of places for international students. The exact number depends on the school. So you should check the school's website. Like some schools publish admission statistics. For example, before I applied to Oxford, I could see how many people on their website, I could see how many people applied, how many people got invited to interviews, and how many people got admitted in the end. So there's an international student quota. At Oxford, they say it's 14 international students. But I think usually only about 5 to 7. Yeah. And international status is not based on citizenship alone, but on fee status. So I'm not sure whether, in the past, I think they used to count EU as not international, but I'm not sure whether now they'll count it as international as well. So now we'll go on to the main part of the talk, which is the application process. I will take you through step by step the main parts of the process. Okay, so the first thing is UCAS. That is the common application portal that everyone has to go through. When I was applying in that year, it was still like an old-fashioned looking website, but now they've rebranded it into a very nice looking website called the UCAS Hub. And you have up to 5 choices, but only 4 choices for medicine or dentistry. And something to take note is that if you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you can only choose one, meaning that you can only apply to either Oxford or Cambridge in the same year and not to both. The application fee for this year is £22.50 for single choice and £27 for more than one choice. For most of us, we would put more than one choice. We would try to use up as many options as possible because even if, let's say, you only want to apply to one school, you may or may not get into that school. So it's still good to have some backup options. And since you're already putting all the effort into putting together your application, you might as well just spend like a few more dollars to apply to more schools. The last point is about deferred entry, which is up to 1 year. This will apply to mostly to those of you who will be doing NS. Okay, so this is the timeline for UCAS this year. I took it from the official UCAS slides. The most important day you have to take note of is 15 October, which is the early deadline for medicine or dentistry, and also Oxford or Cambridge. So like your friends applying to other courses or other schools will have like a later deadline in January. Whereas for all of you here, I believe you will be interested in medicine or dentistry, you have to apply by 15 October. The other dates are all on the UCAS website, so don't worry about taking them down. So first of all, setting up an account. Most of us would register through our school because this is considered more credible by universities. The school should give you a buzzword for you to register on UCAS. If they haven't given you one, go and ask your higher education office or something. And the school will therefore send the application on your behalf. So most schools should have like an earlier internal deadline. Do check if they have that because it may be earlier than 15 October. Now, this is just some of the main things that you have to put into UCAS. So obviously the profile, this is all on UCAS, so I'll not go through them one by one. For education, there'll be A-levels or IB, they'll ask for your grades, as well as your GCSEs or O-levels or year 4 IP exam results. So for A-levels and IB, most of us, like if you're applying when in JC2 or something, you wouldn't have taken the exams yet. Therefore, you'll actually be applying with your predicted grades. So it's very important for your teachers to know you well, to put in good predicted grades for you. And employment, NS if you have done it, but it's not important. As in, it's not important like to have employment. You don't have to put anything. For personal statement, I'll talk about later. The important thing is also the reference. So you need to nominate one person to write a reference for you. And usually it's our form teacher who does it, but it can be any teacher or anyone who knows you well, even your employer if you've worked for someone like NS or somewhere else, but it must be someone who knows you well and can write good things about you. Now we'll move on to the admissions test. So you cannot carry results from one year to the next, meaning that you have to take the test in the same year that you apply. So there are two admissions tests, BMAT, Biomedical Admissions Test, and UCAT, University Clinical Aptitude Test. So BMAT is later. So BMAT is usually in October or November, or even early November. Take note that most schools only accept the later BMAT. There are 2 sessions per year, but most schools only accept the October or November one. So take the later one. This is required by Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, and Leeds. Whereas for the UCAT, it's earlier. It's from July to September, and you can take it at any time throughout this test period, unlike the BMAT, which is the same day across the entire country. And this is required by most other medical schools and most dental schools. So the BMAT. The BMAT is a 2-hour written paper, no calculators allowed. So for those of you who become very reliant on your calculators, like in A-level math, you have to go back and like revise how to do mental calculations. Yeah, because it's very important that you can do it quickly. The first section is thinking skills. And for this, there's no real way to prepare for it, but practice papers, like the official past papers, are very useful to practice. Section 2 is scientific knowledge and applications. So it's both science and math. And the last section is a writing task. You choose 1 from 3 essay style questions and you write an essay, a 1-page essay. So these are some tips. First of all, revise early because BMAT is at the same time as your exams for those of you who are applying during your last year of JC. Section 2 tests O-level math and science, so all 3 subjects, meaning bio, chem, and physics. So for example, if in JC you're only taking physics or you're only taking bio, you have to revise the other one. Section 3 tests interview style questions and make sure you write a balanced argument. It is limited more by space than by word count, so there's no like word limit, but you can only write on 1 page. So there's actually on the official BMAT website, you can find the answer sheet that the answer sheet that they use for the actual thing. You can actually print it out and try writing just to see like how much you can write within that space and how much you can write in 30 minutes. You actually can't write that much in 30 minutes. Practice is very important. So the best way to practice is the official past papers. If you finish all the past papers, there are also exercise books and online courses. Next is the UCAT. The difference is that UCAT is computerized with all MCQs and no scientific knowledge is needed. So they test stuff like verbal reasoning, decision-making, reasoning, quantitative abstract reasoning, situational judgment. Some tips is to familiarize yourself with the test format and online interface, especially the virtual calculator, because it's quite different from like a normal calculator in the sense that you're pressing the keys on the virtual interface. So it can be a bit clumsy. And do practice questions under timed conditions. This is similar to the BMAT. The questions are generally easier than the BMAT, but you have a lot less time. So it's time pressured. And again, there are official practice tests and question banks on the website, and also exercise books and online courses. Now we'll move on to the personal statement. This is very important because this is the only chance for admissions officers to see who you are as an individual before the interview. This is the only chance for them to see you as a person other than your grades and your portfolio. So please write many drafts, start early. For me, I think I remember I wrote like 9 drafts or something. And I started around this time now, like around August. So you can start now if you're applying this year. And you just have to like keep going back and refining it, and also get people to read it, like get your teachers, or if your school has like a review service, or even your friends or your parents to read it, give you feedback and rewrite it. As you refine it over time, you will find that it improves over time. There's one common personal statement for all schools, so avoid mentioning the school by name. The limit is 4,000 characters and 47 lines, whichever is reached first. So on UCAS, there's like, I think there's a space for you to actually copy and paste it in to see how much you're over the limit, because obviously it might be a bit different from when you type in a Word document and in the place where you submit it. So obviously no plagiarism unless you don't want to get in. What to include in your personal statement. So these are just some general points. You don't have to like follow this, but these are just some suggestions for you to get started, some of the main things to include. Obviously, like why you're interested, your knowledge and enthusiasm for the subject. The UK focuses a lot on the course rather than you as a person. I heard people who say that like in my JC, they told us that The US tends to look more for you as a person, whereas the UK will focus more on why you want to do this subject in particular, why you want to do medicine or dentistry, as well as like how your previous studies, jobs, work experience, and so on relate to medicine or dentistry, activities or hobbies, trainings or achievements that show your skills. So demonstrate that you're a great candidate and you have the skills and qualities they're looking for. A mistake that a lot of applicants make is that they just describe what they did without without trying to like relate it back to the skills and qualities that are needed for medicine and dentistry. This is a suggestion for the main overall structure. Obviously, there's no one-size-fits-all formula for the personal statement, but if you're struggling to get started, these are some suggestions, like a basic framework. So in the introduction, try to focus on like your motivation for medicine or dentistry. Then go on to talk a bit about the course. Why are you passionate about it and what have you done before that relates to it, as well as work or other experiences. How were you inspired and what did you learn? Other achievements and activities, what sets you apart, and any soft skills. So you can even mention like your CCA at this point, especially like if you held some leadership position or some good achievements that you can relate to certain qualities. And of course, conclusion. So some general tips is that you should be genuine and honest. So genuine engagement and enthusiasm is very important. Avoid over-exaggerated statements because I think admissions tutors will be quite skeptical of it if you are overly exaggerated. Like you don't have to emphasize it too much. Rather, it's better to actually focus on concrete experiences, concrete examples of what you did and experienced and what you learned. And if it's hard to pinpoint a defining moment, you can write about what you've consistently done or experienced to sustain your interest. Avoid cliches and overused statements like from a young age, for as long as I can remember, I was born to be a doctor, and blah, blah, yeah. It just doesn't really help because, yeah, don't waste your words on those expressions. A very important thing is show, don't tell. So telling means like you're just listing the activities or listing what you've done before without actually relating it to the purpose of your personal statement. Okay, so showing is, so for example, you can't just say, I am a good leader, I'm a good team player, because that doesn't convince anyone. Instead, you should try to show that through what you've done and how it's relevant to the purpose of your personal statement, which is why you are suitable for medicine, why you're passionate about medicine or dentistry. Yeah, so some examples of what you can include is like, if you have skills such as like musical instruments or cross-stitching, jewelry making, that can relate to like dentistry in terms of manual dexterity. And also obviously includes a bit of extracurriculars, show that you do something, you're a holistic student, you don't just study all day. And use the STAR framework, which I'll talk about later. So don't make it like a laundry list of experiences. Instead, choose the 3 or 4 most relevant, most important ones that you want to focus on so that you can actually write about it and make a narrative out of it. Remember to focus on your story. Okay, so a lot of you asked like what qualities do schools like med schools or dental schools look out for. You can actually find it on some schools' website. I took this from the Oxford website. And obviously it's quite similar, I guess, across different schools in the sense that they will always be looking out for stuff like empathy, communication, leadership, and teamwork, as well as capacity for hard work. So the STAR framework is something that you can use for both personal statement and interviews. So STAR, S, situation, describe the situation you were in. Task, describe what you needed to do. Action, the actions that you took and the skills that you demonstrated, and the result, so the outcomes of it if possible. So this is a very helpful framework because for you to be able to write without just listing activities, like without just naming them. I also find this framework quite helpful, which my school told us to use. It's ABC, activity, benefit, cost. So the thing is that it reminds you to link back to the course, because if you just use the STAR framework, I think some people forget that, oh, you need to link it back to why this is relevant to medicine or dentistry. And yeah, they just talk about like what happened, but they forget to link it back. So what do you learn? What do you do? What do you learn? And how does it relate to your course? So now we'll move on to the interviews. For shortlisted applicants, you will usually get interviews between December to March, and most will still be online for this application cycle. There are 3 main types of interviews: multiple mini interviews, panel interview, or academic interview, and I'll go through them one by one. So the multiple mini interviews or MMIs, they are 5 to 10 stations and usually a few minutes each. So they can evaluate many different aspects like medical ethics, communication skills, personal statement, even scientific questions, and also standard interview questions. So an example would be they give you an essay to write on a medical ethics question, and then you discuss with the interviewer, or they give you a scenario and they ask, oh, what will you do in this situation? And then you have to present it to the interviewer as well as what are your reasons for doing what you did. And also talk about yourself. So this here is just a screenshot from Imperial College London, which is similar to the Oxford one, like the stuff they look out for in interviews is very similar. And then there's the panel interview. So these are questions that you can actually prepare for. Why medicine? Why study here? What makes you a good fit for this school? And how can you contribute to this university? Finally, academic interviews, which is Oxford and Cambridge, because they want to be special. So they won't ask that many personal questions. They may ask 1 or 2 personal statement questions at the start of the interview, but then they immediately go into like the science questions. You'll be asked very scientific questions or ethical problems. So for mine, I had a few scientific ones and then 1 ethical interview. And it's meant to simulate a supervision or a tutorial. They want to know how you think, and yeah, they want to see whether you'll thrive in their system, basically. If you have questions about this, you can ask me later. So interview preparation, prepare for and practice answering standard questions. You can find this online or in preparation, like in those like interview books and stuff. Prepare anecdotes using the STAR framework, which I mentioned earlier, because having these anecdotes will make it easier for you to talk about them without being flustered on the actual day. So even if you think you can just think on your feet and talk, it's better to have some things prepared. Anything in your personal statement can be asked, so be very familiar with it. Before the interview, go back and read your personal statement again. If, for example, you said like you read a book or you read some books in your personal statement, make sure you've actually read it. And if you forgot what it's about, go back and read it again because they can ask you about it. And if you say you did a research project or a work experience, go back and think about what you did and what you learned because they can ask you about it. And of course, do prior research on your school and course and stay up to date on recent medical research, healthcare, and social issues. So stuff like reading the news is very important. Common topics, why do you want to do medicine? Why not another degree? Discuss elements of your personal statement, science questions or creative problems, healthcare systems or regulations. Yeah, so if you're applying to the UK, it'd be good to read up a bit about the UK healthcare system, like the NHS. Biomedical ethics, it's good to know the 4 pillars of medical ethics and also the common ethical scenarios in medicine. Talk about the time you demonstrated a certain personal quality. And for dentistry, additionally, they will consider manual dexterity, and they have a greater emphasis on anatomy and spatial relations. So this is a worked example of how you can answer a question with the STAR framework. I will not go through it because I'm already short of time, but you can read it on your own if you want the slides. So after the interview, most universities will convey their decisions within a few weeks. And in the UK, something that's different, I guess, from Singapore is that you can request for feedback from the admissions team if you're rejected, and they will tell you like why they rejected you. Offers will show up on UCAS. You can accept or reject them in the portal. So usually you'll have some time to do this because universities tend to give out offers at different times. And start applying for your visa as soon as possible, but this is for later, I guess. Yeah, so this I won't go into too much detail on what you should do after you get the offer, but just for those of you who are interested, is first of all, you have to do health checks. You will be getting a blood test, I believe, and if you don't have enough antibodies, you'll have to get booster shots or revaccinations. And your vaccination or immunization records, as well as DBS check. So for Singapore, that's from the police force. I think you can apply online and get it by mail. Then for visa applications, you apply with a CAS number issued by the university. But the university should provide you with very detailed instructions of how to do it, so don't worry. If you've forgotten everything I've just said, because I know it's a lot, and it's a bit complicated, and I went through very fast, you can just remember the key dates. So I didn't put like the exact dates here because they differ across each year, but the month usually remains the same. So usually UCAT, and then there's the UCAS deadline 15 October, then BMAT in October, interviews, followed by offers, and most of us fly off to the UK between September to October, depending on when school starts for you. Applying during NS. So there are 2 windows to apply in 2 years of NS. In the first window, you apply for deferred entry, second window, regular entry. do take note that if you have a deferred offer in your first round and you want to apply again your second round, it means you reject the first offer. And so you should only do it if you are very confident that you can get a second offer and you know that you don't want to go to the school that you got in the first round. So this is the timeline for applying during NS. The main difference is that there are 2 application windows and a longer time for you to apply, and you can apply with your actual grades. Okay, so I will skip this slide, but basically this is tips from seniors saying that you should save your leave in case you have to go for interviews and stuff. A common scenario is that you will end NS earlier, so you may end in like November, second year post JC or something, but school starts in September or October, so you can't actually start in the same year. You still have to wait until the next year to start. Yeah, which is not very good, but yeah, that's just. Yeah, so you still have to wait. Usually you still have to wait 2 years. So for the funding, we'll go through the main options now. Possible sources of funding are listed here. So most of us, I think, are privately funded, meaning that our parents pay for our school fees, which is quite sad, but it's because there are very, very limited scholarships for medicine and dentistry overseas. So if you look at a lot of other degrees, there are many scholarships available, but most of them will exclude medicine or dentistry in the eligibility criteria. The first possible one is A-STAR National Science Scholarship, but for this, you need to apply to a school that offers the MBBS PhD program, meaning that you want to become a clinician scientist, you have a strong interest in research. Because it will be a much longer course, you will have to do a PhD with your MBBS, and you will have a 6-year bond, which is very long. And so you have to know that you are committed to doing research and that you're okay with having to do research for so many years. The pre-employment grant applies, most of us are eligible for it. But you have to apply during medical school and not before, in the middle of medical school. So you apply before entering or during clinical years. This is only available for medical students and not dental students. So it will only cover the remaining years after you apply. For example, if you apply when you're going to your 5th year, they will only cover your 5th year or your 6th year if you have a 6th year. And it only covers 60% of the annual tuition fees for up to $50,000 per year. So it's not a full scholarship. That's why they don't call it a scholarship. If you take a 1-year grant, you'll have a 3-year bond in Singapore. If you take a 2 to 3-year grant, you have a 4-year bond. Other funding includes the Lok Ching Kim Scholarship. This is a full overseas scholarship with no bond. However, they usually prefer degrees other than medicine, so it's quite hard for medical students to get it. And also, I heard that they give very few scholarships per year. There's the Lee Foundation bursary for students from lower income households. You will receive $30,000 for 1 year, and you have to apply every year. So you only get the bursary in the year that you apply. The good thing about it is that it's also bond free. So planning ahead, what can you do now? A lot of you asked about portfolio. Obviously, now is the time for you to start building your portfolio because a competitive application is many years in the making. You really have to do a lot of stuff before even applying. First of all, obviously, clinical attachments or shadowing if you have connections at hospitals, or you can also apply through the hospital's websites. Volunteering is very useful to volunteer in a healthcare related setting. For example, I volunteered at a hospice when I was in JC. Research on courses and universities, so you can attend talks and fairs, websites like Bright Spark, the Student Room, the Matic Portal, talk to current students at various universities, and plan your study schedule wisely to balance your exams, the admissions process, and admissions tests, because especially if you're applying in the same year as your exams, there'll be a lot going on, and you really have to plan your time very wisely. So if you're curious about what happens after graduation, this is for medicine. So for Singapore, if you go back to Singapore, there will be a postgraduate year 1, PGY1, which used to be called like house officer, and that is 1 year. And I think based on what I saw online, you can also take PGY2 as a medical officer, and then there's residency, which is 4 to 6 years depending on the specialty that you choose. If you stay in the UK, there will be 2 foundation years, FY1 and FY2, followed by specialty training, which is 3 to 8 years, again depending on the specialty that you choose. So how long the whole thing takes depends a lot on the path that you choose at each point, whether you go back to Singapore, whether you stay in the UK, and which specialty. So you may end up ending at this, like becoming a consultant at the same time as your peers or 1 to 2 years later. And for dentistry, there's conditional registration in Singapore so you need to work under supervision for at least the first 2 years after graduating. And whereas in the UK, the dental foundation training is at least 1 year of supervision before you can work in the NHS. And this is a brief overview of the pros and cons of studying in the UK. Before I hand over to the volunteer speakers who will be sharing more of their personal experiences. So first of all, the opportunities. The good thing is that there are world-class research opportunities. I guess research in the UK is a lot more than in Singapore, and there's easier and wider access to leading medical conferences. However, you will definitely have fewer networking opportunities with Singaporean healthcare professionals and less familiarity with the Singapore healthcare system. So if you intend to go back to Singapore after you graduate, you will probably have to catch up when you go back. When you just go back, like maybe the first year after you graduate, you have to catch up with everyone else. And about the teaching of the course, so the good things about teaching is that you will be taught by leading scientists and doctors. You will learn through dissections at most universities. There's a wider range of teaching hospitals. However, the cost is all the negatives, okay, which is higher tuition fees, as I mentioned earlier, higher cost of living, and also harder to find funding because there are very, very limited scholarships. In terms of the lifestyle, the good thing is that you have multicultural experiences and travel opportunities all around Europe and all around the UK and Europe. There's also a chance for personal growth and independence. There's more freedom. You learn to do a lot of things on your own and take care of yourself. It's a less taxing schedule. So this depends on which school you go to, but in general, it's more chill than in Singapore. You will have more free time, I think, in your preclinical years. However, it's a different culture. It may be hard for some of us to adapt and to make new friends with people from a different culture. It's also far from home and family with a large time zone difference. At some point, you will experience homesickness. Maybe you are sitting here today and you think that will never happen to me, but trust me, it will at some point. That's what I thought before I came as well, but yeah. Okay, so here are some useful resources. If you want the slides, I can send it to you if you fill in the feedback form at the end. And thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them in Slido. I will be in one of the breakout rooms later as well, or you can address your questions to the other speakers. Okay, so now we'll move on to the volunteer sharings. We're now going to hear from Wilden, Sayona, and Chin or Dr. Cheong on their personal experiences in the UK. Wilden is a second-year medical student at the University of Bristol. He was previously from NJC. Sayona is a fourth-year medical student at the University of Liverpool, previously from UWC-SEA. Chin is a junior doctor working in the UK. He graduated from the University of Manchester Medical School and is an alumnus of TJC. Without further ado, I'd now like to hand over to Wilden.
Thank you both, Shaylin and Zhe-Qing. Hold on. Okay, can everyone see the screen? Okay, all right. Hi everyone, my name is Wilden. I'm a medic from the University of Bristol and just finished my first year. So what I'll be covering today is a brief introduction about myself, which schools that I apply to, how the first year has been in the UK, and discuss the pros and cons about living in the UK and comparing this with NUS and NTU. So a bit about myself. I'm from NJC. I took 4 H2s. I did not take biology as an A-level. And for my CCAs, I did karate and I played football. I completed my A-levels in 2018, applied in 2019 with a deferred entry into 2021, and I had actual A-level grades when I applied. So which schools that I applied to? I applied to both NUS and NTU. Applied to NUS thrice, got rejected thrice, and then I applied to NTU once and got rejected. So it's not the smoothest journey into medicine for me. So for the UK schools that I applied to, there are 4 of them. I applied to Oxford, got rejected. So as Zhe-Qing has said, you can ask for feedback after they send you a rejection letter to see where you stand. So what Oxford sent me was that my BMAT and my O-levels were not competitive enough, and thus I was not offered an interview. I applied to Queen Mary. I also got rejected. My UCAT was okay, it was within the cut-off range, but my A-level scores were not good enough. So it shows that even applying to the UK is still very competitive, even with three A's in A-levels. Applied to Edinburgh. This time, both my UCAT and my A-level scores were not good enough. And lastly, I applied to Bristol. I got offered an interview, went to Bristol for my interview, and my offer letter got sent about 2 months later. So this is a picture of me after my interview in Bristol. So how has the first year been like in the UK? It's great, it's cold, but there are a lot of sites and there are many things to do outside of medicine. So I really like the football. So I've managed to support my own local club. I went to the clubs nearby in Bristol and managed to support both the men's and the women's national team, as you can see from the top 2 pictures. So as someone who did not take biology, I can share some of my experiences when applying and studying medicine. I've listed down the schools that you can apply to that do not require biology, but I would say that you please check the requirements of the various schools before applying. Preclinical teaching, that's year 1 and 2, differs for each school, but biochemistry, which is part of O and A-level biology, are covered during the first semester quite quickly, before they move on to specific system or organs. As a physics student, I definitely struggled a bit for my first exam, but I managed to recover for my final exam because I have very helpful friends, and there are definitely a lot of resources available to help you catch up. Yes, and I definitely thought that my peers who took biology was at an advantage, but if you're willing to put in the work, I'd say that you were able to catch up and score a decent grade. So I personally scored within the top third of my cohort. So the pros and cons of the UK, they are listed here. We start with the pros. You learn independence, as Zhe has said. This is the first time I cooked for myself. I never cooked when I was in Singapore. Now I semi-know how to cook, I guess. There's a big international community, so I have friends from all over the world and a lot of Caucasian friends. So it's not just friends within Europe, but I also have friends from South Korea and Japan as well. And you're not bonded anywhere, so the world is your oyster. You can choose to work anywhere. However, the living cost is expensive, as Zhe covered earlier. Homesickness is a thing that I also experience, and you need to work hard if you want to return to Singapore as a doctor. So these are actually some of my cooking. As you can see in the top left photo, there's rice, specifically short grain rice. So Asian marts are available in most cities. The bottom right picture is what a takeaway would usually look like. It's 10 pounds, but the portion is quite significant as well. And then like most other speakers mentioned, being in Europe, it's really easy to travel around. So I went to Munich during my Easter break, and the return ticket was like 50 pounds. So I definitely would recommend that if you're in the UK, use the opportunity to travel around Europe. So comparing this with NUS and NTU, so UK medical school is definitely chiller than both the other aforementioned Singapore medical schools. I compared my timetable to a friend who studies at NUS, and it was definitely less hectic. I had more time to pursue other things outside of medicine, as you could see I was traveling, watching the football. You definitely have a different experience. The NHS and the Singapore healthcare system is different, and there's a different mindset about how healthcare is being dispensed to patients. If you finish FY1 in the UK, you get GMC, which allows you to practice in all Commonwealth countries. Different opportunities are available in UK medical school. One of them is intercalation. This is an option to add a degree on top of your medical degree for an extra year. It may be required for some schools, but for Bristol, it's optional. I am thinking of doing it actually. NUS offers some kind of program from 2021 onwards, but it's limited right now, and I'm unsure about how it will change for the future. And the last one, most important factor is probably the fees. You will see that the two fees, the numbers are quite similar, but the UK is twice as expensive due to the conversion rate. So I've actually took a look at some of the questions that you posted on the sign-up forms, and these are some thoughts that I have. The first one will be NS related, so these are more applicable to the guys. Unfortunately, you cannot defer NS to study medicine, so you'll only be applying your first year of national service. However, I find that this is advantageous because for NS guy, you apply with actual grades. Thus, the school can give you an unconditional offer immediately, and schools will definitely favor this. So for my tips for all guys in this talk right now is to focus on your A-levels and make sure you get the grades. Unfortunately, this is something you cannot control, but it's good if you can get a stay-out vocation to prep for your UCAT and BMAT. If you have a stay-in vocation where you stay in from Monday to Friday, I think you just need to be a bit more hardworking to prep for these if you're staying in camp. So you must be really disciplined during your national service. So the second question is related to what should I do to increase my chances of getting into these courses. So I think it's more important to appreciate the transferable skills that what you do, what your CCA has into medicine. So always link back to medicine. And this is where you have to get creative to sell yourself. So I can say, for example, if I play football, it allows me to practice my teamwork and leadership skills. Then it's applicable to the multidisciplinary team in medicine. So the next thing I would definitely highly recommend is doing a medical internship or getting exposed to the medical or dental field. I would not say do it for the sake of CV building. And I think if you do it, it's also one of the easiest way to show commitment commitment to the course. So it's definitely something you should include in your CV or sorry, not your CV, your personal statement or your interview. But more importantly, I think this last point is very important. Have an open mind. Do not fall into this thing called the sunk cost fallacy. So in my personal experience, before I decided on medicine, I actually wanted to do dentistry and I worked as a dental assistant. The most important question that I asked myself was, will I enjoy this career for the next 40 years of my life? I'm not throwing any shade to the dentist, but I could not bring myself to do cleaning teeth every day. So, and I'm not blessed to have the technical skills to work on a small tooth, so I decided against it. Then I went to shadow a GP, and then I realized that I really liked it and what GPs do to help their community as well. So I say for medicine, try to go shadow a GP if you can, because that is probably what most doctors end up as, and it's probably more realistic as well if you're going to end up in a career in medicine or dentistry. So general dentists or general practitioners. So I wish everyone all the best, and I hope this will help you in your application. Thank you.
Hello, can you see my screen? Okay. So hi guys, I'm Sayana. I'm going into my 4th year of medical school at the University of Liverpool. And as said before, I went to UWC, and that's an international school. So I did the IB diploma, and I started medical school in 2019. So I was 18 years old, and obviously that's quite a young age for a lot of people to go and live around the world. So it's definitely really scary. And I'm kind of going to talk more about my experience in the UK and kind of like fitting in and like the social and aspect of medical school as well. So I know that moving to a new country is super scary, especially if you've lived in Singapore your entire life or haven't gotten the chance to travel very much. And it's obviously, you guys have probably been impacted by COVID as well, where we didn't get to travel very much, and you might have never been to the UK before. But if I can do it, so can you. I think it's definitely a really good experience, and it helps you become an overall wider outlook individual. Like Wilden said earlier, the world is kind of your oyster. You have the opportunity to meet people from around the world, and you get to work in many different places. So I applied to medical school in the UK. So I did 4 medical schools and 1 for biomed. I also applied to Ireland for medical school. So that's a bit of a different experience as well. But I, in the end, chose to go to the University of Liverpool because I really enjoyed. When I went there for my interview, I really liked the city, and the people, some of the friendliest I'd ever met in my life. And every medical student I talked to had a lot of extracurricular activities and things they did outside of medicine. So I thought that was really important, especially for me, because I'm not the most academic person. I like to do a lot of other stuff. And it was really, really important to me to be able to balance my life, not only just studying all the time, but also to do other stuff. So one thing I definitely want to raise awareness of is culture shock. I feel like everyone will feel it, even if you have lived in the UK before, because it's very different from the kind of culture we're used to in Singapore. Like I want to draw attention to the drinking culture, especially like a lot of freshers week is based around drinking and going to clubs, and that's not really something where we do a lot in Singapore. Obviously, I've been to clubs in Singapore and I have drank in Singapore, but it's very different to the experience you'll get in the UK. A lot of people, that's their main way of socializing, and a lot of activities and ways to meet people are through that. So definitely, if you are someone who doesn't drink or doesn't enjoy clubbing, that is something to keep in mind, that that is something a lot of people will be doing. I'd say majority are, but there are other ways to meet people, and you can definitely talk to a big range of people and meet people in other ways, such as society events or through lectures and other things. So definitely, but it's good to keep in mind that you might experience culture shock. Another thing is fitting in. So you're going to be in the school, if you're doing medicine or dentistry, for 5 to 6 or even longer if you end up doing foundation programs there or working in that city. So you have to commit a lot of your life to it. So it's important to be yourself and choose a city that fits you and a university that fits you and what you like and your priorities in life as well, rather than just looking at what school is ranked the highest or which school has the best employability, because you need to think about you living there for 5 or 6 years minimum. And you need to think about what your experience is going to be like there. So definitely it's important to be true to yourself and choose wisely when it comes to that. 3 is balancing life. It is definitely a very academically rigorous course. Medicine and dentistry are both very academic. You guys would know that. You guys know that when you're going into it. And everyone who goes into medicine is one of the smartest people in their school and respective courses as well before coming to medical school. Obviously, currently before university, you're probably definitely in one of the highest academic people in your school, and you're definitely aiming for a very academic course, but there everyone is the top of their school and everyone is kind of more similar academic levels. So it's important to keep that in mind. But it's definitely possible to have a social life and do a lot of things. I do many activities. I play for my school's football team. I also do dance, and then I'm also able to have quite a wide variety of social events that I attend. And a big thing is the NHS. It's definitely not like our Singapore healthcare system. And it's important to keep in mind that people have different attitudes towards medical students and dental students. And as the NHS, you know, is free for everything, people do sometimes take advantage of the system. And it's important to keep that in mind, that that is that people are going to have very different views. I've seen people in placement that have hated doctors and refused to talk to doctors or don't believe in medicine and have been forced to go to the hospital. So definitely something to keep in mind. So this is a quote that I made, but it's basically that living in Singapore is a bubble, and it's important to build your character to leave the bubble. It'll help you appreciate and love your country more and know whether you want to come back or not. It's always good to get a wider range and better experiences. So my main top tips are to definitely try and live in university accommodation for year 1, because it exposes yourself to a lot of people from different courses. So I lived in a flat of 6 in first year in university accommodation, and I was the only medic in my entire floor. So that was really good because I got to make a lot of non-medical school friends, which is really good because it gives you a wide range and you're not just stuck within the medical school kind of environment always. Also, my second advice is definitely go to every event that interests you, whether this is in freshers or after. Even if you're going alone, definitely go. Don't wait for friends to go with you, because you'll definitely miss out on an opportunity, and there will definitely be people who are also there alone. My next thing is to definitely use the NHS. You are paying for it with your student visa, so make sure you sign up for a GP, get vaccines that you can't get. Make sure to use it. It is a resource you're paying for. Definitely try new things. This is the best time in your life to try things out. So here are some photos of me in medical school. I've assisted in many surgeries. I've just finished 3rd year, and I got the opportunity to deliver a few babies, both naturally and through C-section, with the help of some doctors. So that was really incredible, obviously, as a 3rd year. I've also run my own GP clinics for an entire month and a part of my GP placement. So that was really amazing, something that's really good at Liverpool. And yeah, you do spend a lot of time in the library sometimes, even outside of exam period. But you can also have a really good social life. I feel like I definitely have that. We had our halfway ball as well. So this is a photo from my halfway ball, which was really, really good. I've got the opportunity to be a part of many societies, and I got an award for it as well in my general university. And I also enjoy clubbing and going out with my friends and socializing. But yeah, thank you. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And yeah, thank you. Good luck.
Hi guys, I'm Cheng Jun. I'm a junior doctor working in the UK. Give me 1 second while I share my slides. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to be talking about a few topics based on the questions that you guys have submitted. And my first piece of sort of advice would be, for those of you thinking of applying, is to do your homework. There is a lot to get through in terms of the information. So, all these things that, in fact, Zhe Qing has mentioned in the talk, which I found, was very comprehensive. But basically, yeah, just find out, about the unis that you're interested in and using what Zhe Qing has provided as a guide to do more research based on those. Because I think quite a few questions can be answered, on the medical school's website. There is one sort of resource that I can recommend, which is the Medical Schools Council in the UK. So that's like a body that encompasses all the medical schools. If you go onto their website, I don't have the actual link, but they did put together a PDF document of basically all the medical schools and the entry requirements, the course type, and quite a few all this information. So yeah, you can have a look at that for a summary. But of course, bear in mind that not all medical schools in the UK are recognized in Singapore. There was a question I saw about applying via an agent. And again, this is an option open. Personally, I think I did look into it, but eventually I didn't use it. Reason being is that as I did more research on my own, I felt that I was able to apply on my own, and it probably wasn't that required, to get someone to do it on my behalf. Okay, and then moving on. So I think you guys are at a stage where you're thinking of medicine or dentistry. So sorry, I'm a medic, so I can't speak for dentistry. But so for example, if you're interested in medicine, I think now is the right time to ask yourself, why do you want to do medicine? Why do you think you want to go into medicine? And basically, so the first thing is self-reflection, to really think about what are your reasons. List them out, and then the next step would be to verify any sort of assumptions that you may have made in these thinking. So for example, if one of your reasons is that I want to do medicine because I want to earn lots of money, there's nothing wrong inherently with that. If you get senior enough, you will earn quite a bit. It's just that if you consider the various options, so comparing medicine versus other careers, you might find that, actually you can earn much more, much quicker in other careers. And obviously, yeah, so just depending on sort of what your reasons might be. And yeah, so it would be useful to get some sort of personal experience, and this is where the shadowing comes in. So for example, like what Wilden mentioned, to go for some shadowing. And if you do happen to have some connections to get it, then that's good. If not, yeah, apply through hospitals, clinics, and all sorts. So actually, I found it interesting with what Wilden mentioned about the applying or to shadow with a GP, because actually personally, I'm not a fan of GP. Not that I'm nothing against it. It's just that it's too varied for my my own liking. So again, I think it depends. If you do shadow with a GP, You may or may not like it, but again, then it's for yourself to consider, does that put you off just GP, or does it put you off entirely? So it really depends. But obviously, I try to get some shadowing if you can. And then in terms of your personal statement, or in the interview, yeah. So as I think Zhe has mentioned in her talk before, is to be genuine about your reasons, or be genuine about experiences, and also be realistic. So this is a very absurd example, but yeah, just be realistic about what you can do, or what you want to do, because if you say things that the interviewer feels like, oh, maybe you don't quite know sort of the realities of it, then that might affect your sort of your chances or your standing in terms of the interview. In terms of extracurricular and portfolio, I don't have anything in particular to recommend, but I would say that quality is much better than quantity. So I have seen people that they ask like, oh, I've done such and such, and it's a full list of like 10 items, but really, how does that show, apart from the fact that fine, you have done so much, but really what does that show about yourself? So that's why these are the two questions really that you should be answering, to show, yeah, just what you got out of it and what have you contributed to the cause, and why is this important to yourself? And yeah, show not tell. In terms of cultural differences, so as has been mentioned before, yeah, one thing is the food. The good thing is that I think it's relatively common to find Asian food now in most UK places, but it might not be what you're used to, in the sense that it might be adapted to suit the local taste. And yeah, in terms of transport, it's probably not so much of an issue in first and second year, where you're just in campus, but if you go on to clinical, you might need to travel to distant placements and things like that. And yeah, public transport is more expensive. You have to work out. So it's not like here where you have, it's not like in Singapore where you have the EZ-Link card. You can just tap in, tap out. So in many places, you will buy tickets in advance, and you have to work out, operators and things like that. And for some of you, you might be thinking of getting a car. It definitely is much cheaper than getting a car in Singapore. So that might be an option. And yeah, in terms of way of life and drinking, as the previous speakers mentioned, this is quite a big thing in the UK, in uni life. But I think one advice that I received that I found quite helpful was that, just because people are going to the pub doesn't necessarily mean that you have to drink yourself if you're not, that big fan of drinking. You could just go for, the experience, and you can just get some non-alcoholic stuff as well. Communication style might be a thing that you realize is a bit different. So for example, people here are more, so if they want to give something negatively, they might say in a more roundabout way. So there were times where I was actually receiving sort of feedback, but I didn't realize that, that was something. And as a result, I didn't, it seems as if I wasn't taking into account the feedback. So again, this might be something that you might realize. And in terms of the language, obviously, people speak English in the UK, but you realize that, the accents can be a bit difficult to master, especially initially. And because the UK is very diverse, so you will have people, especially the patients, for example, who may have come from other countries where English is not their first language. So again, that may be something that you will encounter as well. In terms of health and safety, so yes, you will be covered under NHS. In fact, you have to pay the surcharge anyway as part of your visa, so you will be covered. And in terms of coronavirus, I think by the time that you get in September next year, I presume, or even later, hopefully it's not that much of an issue anymore. In terms of mental health, each uni should have their own pastoral support. And of course, you can go to NHS as well if you are experiencing any mental health issues, or of course, if you have a support network of friends or family, you can rely on that as well. In terms of safety, I think it depends on the individual city that you're in, or the campus that you're in. There might be some rougher spots, but I think generally it's fine. So some of you, or might be thinking of coming back to Singapore, or you may think of staying in the UK after medical school, or even going to elsewhere. So I guess it's probably one thing to consider is that does it matter now in the sense of if you're thinking of applying to the UK. So as previous speakers have mentioned as well, is that if you apply to the UK, you can come back to Singapore to work, or you can also stay on in the UK to work for 1 year, get your GMC registration, and then that opens up other avenues. And I saw a question about any common traits linking, medical practitioners or med students. I think perhaps there's a certain element of masochism involved in the sense that you are signing yourself up to potentially a tough life and a life of service, to your patients. So yeah, I mean, if at the end of the day you think that this is what you want to do, then of course, fair enough, yeah, go for it. Uni accommodation. So from what I understand, no, it's not like the Singapore system where they will sort of interview you and assess you. I think different unis work differently, but like at least for my uni, uni accom is guaranteed for all international students, at least for the first year. So yeah, it'd be worth to check that. And then is there a difference between going to a London versus non-London med school? In terms of, working, especially there's an exam that you do in 5th year. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. And yeah, basically whatever decision you choose, whether or not to go into medicine, or maybe you're thinking medicine might not be a thing for you, yeah, just make sure that it's an informed decision. So thank you very much.
A huge thank you to our lovely volunteers for sharing about your personal experiences. It's been fascinating to hear firsthand about what it's actually like to pursue medicine and dentistry in the UK. So as Chunji mentioned in his talk about the SMC accreditation, it's actually in our university booklet, the SMSUK university booklet as well. We'll be having a slide with the link at the end. Yeah. So now we'll be moving to the final part of the session, which is the Q&A in breakout rooms. We have 8 breakout rooms on offer. Rooms 1 to 7 will be focusing on medicine, while room 8 is dedicated to those interested in dentistry. We'll be assigning each of you into a breakout room corresponding to the category shown in column 1, but you will be free to move between the breakout rooms later. So for example, if you're interested in both medicine and dentistry, you can move between the rooms and you can go to the dentistry room as well. Much for attending today. Sorry that the breakout rooms had to be cut short. If you have further questions, we can leave the contacts, like you can message us and we can give you the contacts of the people you wish to ask the questions to, or you can just submit your questions to us and we will get back to you by email. So as mentioned earlier, these are some useful publications for more details about each university and what to do before leaving for the UK. So this is made by the SMSUK committee and they are very useful. Yeah, I'll give you a moment for you to take it down if you want. Yeah, but I'll also include it in the slides that I send out after the talk if you fill in the feedback form. Okay, and these are our social media channels. So do keep a lookout on our social media for any future events from SMSUK that may interest you. I'll also pause here for a while if you want to take it down. Okay, and I'll show you the feedback form. So please fill out the feedback form here if you'd like a copy of the slides and recording from earlier. And please don't go, we will take a photo of everyone. So please turn on your cameras so that we can take a closing photo of the event. Yeah, it will just be a very quick photo, so don't worry.
Hi, sorry, can you go back to the feedback form?
Yeah, I'll go back to it after we take the photo.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Okay, I'll take the
Okay,
photo.
so Sammy will tell us. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Wait, one more time. 1, 2, 3. So many screenshots. Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, I'll now share the feedback form again. Yeah, so please fill in this feedback form if you would like a copy of the slides. And thank you very much for attending the SMSUK Pre-University Talks 2022. It's been an immense pleasure having you all, and we sincerely hope that our talks have been useful towards your journey in becoming future doctors and dentists.
Thank you.